Let me take you back to the moment this whole thing started making noise. Because when the news first broke that Cole Hauser and Sylvester Stallone were teaming up for a brand new Western drama called Blood Aces, the reaction online was immediate. People weren't just curious. They were excited in a way that felt different from the usual TV announcement buzz. And honestly, that reaction makes complete sense when you think about who these two men are and what they've already proven they can do on screen. Cole Hauser spent years building one of the most beloved characters in modern television history as Rip Wheeler on Yellowstone. Rip isn't just a fan favorite because he's tough or because he looks the part. Rip is a fan favorite because Cole made him feel real. He brought a kind of controlled intensity to that role that very few actors can pull off without it feeling forced or theatrical. Every scene Cole was in, you felt it. You believed every word, every look, every moment of silence. That is a rare gift, and it's exactly the kind of presence that a character like Benny Binion is going to demand. Because Benny Binion was not a simple man. He was not a one-dimensional villain or a straightforward hero. He was something far more complicated and far more interesting than either of those things. And that's precisely why this casting feels so right. Cole isn't just stepping into another Western role. He's stepping into the most complex, most layered, most demanding character of his entire career. And from everything he's said publicly about this project, he knows it. He feels the weight of it. He's spoken about Benny with a kind of reverence that tells you this isn't just another job for him. This is personal. This is a story he genuinely believes in and genuinely wants to tell in the right way. And then there's Sylvester Stallone. But the Stallone we've been seeing lately is different. The Stallone who showed up in Tulsa King and absolutely captivated audiences as Dwight Manfredi is a more refined, more nuanced performer than many people expected. He brought warmth and depth and quiet menace to that role in a way that reminded everyone watching exactly why this man has stayed relevant for over 5 decades. That performance proved something important. It proved that Stallone still has something real to offer, that he's not just coasting on nostalgia or name recognition. He's still hungry. He's still willing to dig deep and find the truth in a character. And now he's bringing that same energy to Blood Aces. Not just as a producer, but potentially as someone who could appear on screen alongside Cole in a way that would genuinely be something to witness. Think about what that combination means for a show like this. You have Cole's brooding intensity and Stallone's commanding screen presence coming together around a story that is already gripping enough on its own. The foundation alone is extraordinary. But what really makes this announcement feel significant, what really makes it feel like something beyond just another prestige TV project, is the context it sits in. We are living in a golden age of Western television right now. Yellowstone proved that audiences haven't just kept their appetite for this genre, they've been starving for it. The show's success wasn't a fluke or a lucky break. It was a signal. It told every streaming platform and every network executive in Hollywood that people want these stories. They want the dust and the danger and the moral complexity and the landscapes that feel both beautiful and threatening at the same time. And the response to that signal has been swift. New Western projects have been announced and developed and released at a pace we haven't seen in decades. But here's the thing about all that activity. Not every show that borrows the aesthetic and the setting of a successful Western manages to capture what actually made the original work. Yellowstone worked because Taylor Sheridan understood something fundamental about why people connect with these stories. It's not just about cowboys and ranches and wide-open spaces. It's about power. It's about loyalty. It's about what people are willing to do to protect what they've built and what they love. Blood Aces understands that too, maybe even more deeply. Because the story it's telling isn't fictional, it's real. Every ruthless decision, every calculated power move, every moment of violence and ambition and survival at any cost, it all actually happened. And that reality is going to give this show a weight and an urgency that no purely fictional Western can quite match. Because when you're watching something and you know in the back of your mind that this person existed, that these events unfolded, that this empire was actually built by a real human being with real motivations and real consequences, it hits differently. It lands harder. And Blood Aces is going to hit very, very hard. Let's talk about Benny Binion. Because if you're going to understand why Blood Aces has the potential to be something truly special, you first need to understand who this man actually was. And I'll warn you right now, The more you learn about Benny Binion, the more fascinating and the more unsettling he becomes. This is not a simple story about a gambler who got lucky. This is the story of a man who looked at the world around him, decided he didn't like the rules, and then spent his entire life rewriting them on his own terms. That kind of ambition is rare. That kind of ruthlessness is rarer still. And that combination of the two, wrapped inside a man who somehow also managed to charm nearly everyone he ever met, that is the stuff of genuinely great television. He grew up poor, he grew up tough, and he grew up watching the world divide itself very clearly into two kinds of people, those who made the rules and those who got crushed by them. Benny decided very early on which category he intended to belong to. By the time he was a young man, he was already operating outside the law, running illegal gambling operations across Texas with a boldness that most people in his position simply didn't have. And here's what made him different from the other men operating in that same world. It wasn't just that he was willing to break the law. Plenty of people were willing to do that. What set Benny apart was his vision. He didn't just want to run a gambling den in the back of a bar somewhere. He wanted to build something. He wanted to create something that would last, something that would carry his name and his reputation far beyond the dusty Texas towns where he got his start. That vision, that burning need to build something bigger than himself, is what eventually drove him out of Texas and toward a place where a man like him could operate on a much larger scale. But before we get to Las Vegas, we need to talk about what happened in Texas, because the Texas years are where the real Benny Binion was forged. They're where he learned the lessons that he would spend the rest of his life applying. And those lessons were not gentle ones. Benny ran his gambling operations with a combination of charm and calculated violence that made him both beloved and deeply feared in equal measure. He understood something that a lot of people in his world never quite grasped, that reputation is everything. That how people perceive you, what they believe you're capable of, is sometimes more powerful than anything you could actually do. So he cultivated that reputation deliberately and carefully. He made sure people knew that crossing Benny Binion came with consequences, serious consequences, the kind that didn't leave room for second chances. The biography that Blood Aces is based on, written by Doug J. Swanson, draws from secret government documents and detailed historical records that paint a picture of a man who eliminated his rivals with a cold efficiency that was almost businesslike in its execution. This wasn't passion or rage driving those decisions. This was strategy. This was a man who viewed violence as simply another tool in his arsenal, no different from bribery or negotiation, or the warm smile he could turn on whenever the situation called for it. And that's the detail that makes Benny so compelling as a character, the smile. Because Benny Binion was genuinely likable. People who knew him, even people who had every reason to fear him, often described him with a kind of warmth and affection that seems almost impossible given everything else we know about him. He was generous with his friends. He was loyal to the people he trusted. He had a way of making whoever he was talking to feel like the most important person in the room. That is a genuinely dangerous combination when you pair it with the capacity for the kind of ruthlessness he demonstrated throughout his career. It's the combination that lets a man build a real empire rather than just a criminal operation. Because Benny wasn't just trying to survive or get rich, he was trying to become something. He was trying to carve out a place in history through sheer force of will and intelligence, and a complete willingness to do whatever it took to get there. His formula, as the official book synopsis describes it, was almost insultingly simple on the surface. Run a good business, cultivate the big boys, kill your enemies, and own the cops. 4 steps. That's it. But of course, the simplicity of the formula is part of what makes it so chilling when you think about what it actually meant in practice. Running a good business meant creating gambling operations that were fair enough and well run enough that people actually wanted to come back. Cultivating the big boys meant building relationships with the powerful and the influential, understanding that who you know matters just as much as what you know. Killing your enemies meant exactly what it sounds like, and owning the cops meant that the systems designed to stop men like him were instead working for him. That last part is particularly important because it speaks to something that Blood Aces is almost certainly going to explore in depth: the corruption. The way that Benny didn't just operate outside the law, but actively worked to bend the law to his will. to make institutions that were supposed to represent justice into instruments of his own protection and advancement. That's a story that feels just as relevant today as it did in mid-century America. Maybe even more so, because the questions it raises about power and corruption and who really controls the systems we all live under are questions that never really go away. They just change their shape depending on the era. And when you set those questions against the backdrop of Texas in the 1930s and 40s, and then Las Vegas in its wild, untamed early days, you get a story that is both historically fascinating and deeply uncomfortably timely. That's the kind of story that stays with you. That's the kind of story that sparks real conversations. And that's exactly the kind of story that Cole Hauser and Sylvester Stallone have chosen to bring to the screen, which tells you a great deal about both of them. Now here is where the story really shifts gears, because everything that happened in Texas, all the violence and the power plays and the carefully built reputation, all of it was just the opening chapter. The real story, the story that changed American culture in ways that are still visible today, began when Benny Binion made the decision to leave Texas behind and head west toward a place that was still figuring out what it wanted to be.